ERP is designed as buy stuff, pay to the vendor, move to the next line item, buy another one, pay to the vendor, move to the line item. There is nothing recurring in that. And that's the foundational item why we thought something to manage SaaS purchases, procurement has to be built. And this is bigger than what normally we thought it was because SaaS has become the number two indirect spend.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Once positioned to reduce the overall software spend, SaaS has become one of the highest spend categories for companies. A company could use as many as 1,600 apps across the software categories. The spend might even be more for software companies that are buying someone else's software to manage their own infrastructure. The industrial companies might struggle to understand why building a custom software might not be the smartest idea because of the amount of software required to manage the software infrastructure. In today's episode, our guest, Indus Khaitan, discusses the strategies for centralizing and controlling SaaS spend. He also discusses the difference between other similar technologies such as P-card, corporate credit cards, and the technology he developed. Finally, he discusses other features such as why it's important to control the spend before it actually occurs and blacklisting the spend categories. Let me introduce Indus to you. Indus is the CEO and founder of Column, an on-desk scale company funded by Sequoia and Nexus. Indus has 20 years of business growth, product management, and SaaS experience. He has analyzed SaaS buying for 20 plus companies with over $500,000 in SaaS spend and has been the leader of growth for a unicorn. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, hey Indus, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to see you again, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and I think we have been meeting a little frequently and always have very interesting stories to share. And today, this is the first time that we are probably going to do a real deep dive into the SaaS procurement. So, this is very interesting personally for me. Just to kick things off, if my listeners might not know you, do you want to start with your personal story as well as your current focus in this?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Indus. I grew up in a mining town in India, did some odd jobs early over there, and then had a startup in security space, sold that company to Oracle, moved to United States, San Francisco Bay Area in 2014. And then currently I run a company called Column. We do SaaS procurement and spend management for software purchases. Been running this for past three plus years, and absolutely fantastic time to be doing that business.
Okay, very cool. So obviously, I'm going to ask my standard question, but before that, some listeners might not know what's a mining town in India. So you might want to provide a little clarification there just for their knowledge, I guess.
So I grew up in this place called Dhanbad, which is
Okay.
part of eastern India. If you visualize the geography of India, Delhi is in the center, Bangalore is in the south, Mumbai on the west, and a town or a city called Kolkata. So the suburbs of Kolkata is a mining town called Dhanbad, and coal is mined. Very similar to many of the locations in the United States. It's a bunch of collieries, which is underground and open cast mining neighborhoods strewn together. That's where I grew up, did my schooling there, and then did my undergrad later in a slight not far away from where I grew up, and then all these other things after life.
Yeah, so very interesting. And one more follow-up question there. So you mentioned that you did a lot of hard jobs, and obviously mining is a very different background in general. I think I have spoken to two or three different guests who had a little bit of mining background, but they did not grow up in mining. Okay, they were probably working in mining, and in my mind, I think these two are two different things. So when you grow up, let's say in a mining culture, what did you learn there that you could utilize in your?
I think what you learn there is resilience. So my home was next to a road. That road would see on a daily basis 200 to 300 dump trucks moving back and forth, and
Yeah.
these were transporting coal and debris and sand. So they take out coal from the
Yeah.
mine and they bring sand to fill to the in the mines to to the gap that was created by the coal. And imagine the amount of pollution, amount of dust flying around 24 by 7. That's the town I grew up. And I very vividly remember many of these because, those memories have been etched in my brain forever.
Yeah, and that's very interesting for me as well because as sort of the consultant, for me, everything is a transaction and everything has financial value. So when you sort of take the coal from your mining, now that's a transaction, sitting in my head that if we are working with any of the mining companies, then we need to create a process to sort of get that and then fill the sand. So that's how ERP people think. I mean, for them, everything is transaction, everything is sort of inventory value. So, we are going to have a lot of fun with all of that. But before we do that, we have one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest on the show. And that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Business growth, I think of that, hey, you have a dollar that you have taken from someone or your own dollar. Can you grow that dollar to a 10x or a 5x in a time span defined by you, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? And in that process of growing that dollar to give the return to either yourself or to somebody else, what do you do? Do you create a product? Do you create a company with hundreds and thousands of employees? Are the employees gaining happiness, gaining skills that they could apply and continue on their own personal growth and career journey? That's what I think about business growth. It is not a transaction in a ledger where you give something and you take back. It's a ledger where you give something and take 10x back. Or if you take like an iota of work from someone, you give them 10x back. So it's always like a quantum more exponential than a normal, as you mentioned, the transaction ledger where $1 on the left equals $1 on the right. Business growth is exponential. If I could take a typical SaaS growth as an example, there are playbooks on first year your revenue has to be a million, a 0 to 1 million in, let's say, 12 to 18 months. From 1 to you go to 3. From 3 you go to 10. 10 you go to like 30 and then 60 and then so it's like triple triple twice and then double double twice. So T3, T3D2, I think that's the acronym. That's the SaaS business growth as an example to make that investment viable for anybody to look into it.
Yeah, so very interesting. So one more follow-up, question based on your commentary there, and I like the way you are using the word ledger. Okay, for us as the financial people, for CFOs, that's our bread and butter. But when we look at, let's say, the SaaS companies or the software companies, obviously the blood that we are going to have in the software space, it's very innovative, it's very technology driven. But in my personal experience, and you can tell me if you share the same experience or not, because obviously you are dealing with a lot more SaaS companies than I am. But in my experience, when I talk to any of these SaaS customers, they have a really deep background in technology, okay, but they don't have as much maturity overall from the finance perspective. Sometimes for them, they don't even understand what a real ledger is to be. But in my mind, when you are creating your own internal processes, thinking more from the ledger perspective can provide you a lot of insight in terms of how your architecture is going to be, how many different applications that you should be using in your architecture, and how the reconciliation of those ledgers are going to be. And obviously your product, when you are installing, some of the questions that you are going to get from these either procurement people or the CFOs is, okay, I'm entering all of this data, but how's it going to talk to everything else? So I don't know, whatever
Yeah,
commentary you have.
absolutely. So I'll give you a disclaimer. So when we started Column is a product that sells to the CFO. We look at their spend data and then look at the ROI of the spend, whether they get the dollars worth of software that they're buying. And we are an issuer of a corporate card. So what we built is a software only purchase card. You can't buy airline ticket, but you can buy other pieces of software. Now, when we embarked on the journey, and this is a shocker, I did not know what a ledger was. I did not
I'm
even
not
know
shocked
what
at all.
I did not even know what a left or right accounting, which is, credit and debit. A dollar there in positive has to be a dollar there in negative, so that the ledger has to be balanced out. We, like bunch of us, like six of us as engineers, we just, started YouTube videos, looked at, other open source projects. I think there's a project called GNU Money and looked at their schema. How did they design the ledger as an ER diagram to store money? And it took us like a month and then we learned it all on our own. And of course, now we manage millions of dollars of spend that passes through us on a daily basis. And we make sure that it is balanced on an every day or every transaction.
Okay, so very interesting. So you mentioned, and again, one more follow-up question there based on your commentary, and you mentioned that you guys are the issuer of the corporate card. Is that similar to P card that companies are going to have in their procurement? Different? How different? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? How does it correlate with the P card? And I don't know if you are not familiar with the P card process. I mean, that's very common in the procurement organizations.
Yep. So it's very similar to a P card, except it is more designed as an expense card. So it is designed as an expense card. And the reason I say that, because what happens in a P card, the card is a very high value and controlled by one or two people, like $1 million Amex P card to pay for large volume purchases or, larger volume purchases. In case of us, we have designed the P card to be used by every employee. So if you want to do a $50 purchase, that is only software. We have put rules in place where you can buy only software from this P card. So you cannot take a client out to dinner, but you can buy, let's say, software products, which is 150,000 products that are on, let's say, G2.com, Zoom, Jira, Figma, but you can't use our card to pay for a procurement, which is, let's say, a laptop or an IT purchase, which is different from a traditional P card because it's not designed only for software, it's designed for all procurement. And behind the scenes, we do a lot of these rules. For example, if you use our card for buying Zoom, we will aggregate all the Zoom invoices that come every month. We'll aggregate the commercials or MSA that comes. We'll also bring who are the users of Zoom, how many licenses. Let's say you bought 500 seats of Zoom using our card. We'll bring these 500 users, how much Zoom they're using month over month. And that is probably more than what a traditional P card offers. With traditional P card is, yes, it's an instrument for high volume payments or purchases that could be done. But in our case, we took the aspects of a traditional expense card, some aspects of a P card, but then build a layer of tracking of usage and invoices on top.
So very interesting. So I'm going to have some follow-up comments based on my experience. So my understanding of P card based on the users that we have. The reason why they utilize P card, because every business will have a P card in their process. The reason why P card is introduced in the process is because, and typically this is going to be really for the enterprises, SMBs, they might use it, they might not use it, but they want to make sure that they are not going through the traditional PO process. And the reason why they don't want to go through the traditional PO process is because the cost of performing transaction may be far higher than the expense itself. The whole idea of P card is to sort of have the smaller spend, which is going to be $50 by buying flowers, buying supplies, buying MRO. That's what P card, in my experience, is used for. So I don't know if this is a different P card, which you mentioned that, if you have $1 million purchase, and I don't know if you meant total amount for the P card.
Total amount.
Total amount. Okay, got it. But
Yeah.
I mean, are we aligned overall in terms of the definition of
Yeah.
P card?
We are aligned, and the motivation is also to get rid of checks. When you use a P card, hey, let's not do B2B digital payments using old school. Can we short circuit the process using a P card rather than writing checks to each other? And of course, as you mentioned, smaller all purchases kind of strung together, which is driven by somebody in the procurement team that buying flowers to buying laptops to buying something else. That's correct.
Yeah, so very interesting. So now, let's say if you guys have created that very specific card, obviously I can see a ton of value with the card. But at the same time, number one is, let's say, if I'm the procurement person and I'm trying to incorporate this card in my process, I'm going to have a million. And I'm pretty sure you get a million questions from these users as well. So you are very used to that. But my questions are going to be number one, obviously, now this is going to be an additional card that I need to keep. I may have 15 cards and now I'm keeping one more card. Now, I don't know, let's say if I'm the head of procurement and I am giving this card to my five of the employees, and sometimes they might use it, sometimes they might not use it. And then you also mentioned that you are enforcing the control that, you know what, if you swipe this on Zoom, and I don't know how that correlation work when you are going to be swiping on Zoom, how are you enforcing? Is it going to be based on the domain name? What if they try to do something other than what your rules might not be set up for? So how do you control all of that? So I don't know. I actually have a lot of different questions there. So maybe whatever you can offer, and then I can do some more follow-ups there.
I think those are two great questions, Sam. So the first one is we are a virtual card, so we don't issue a plastic.
Okay.
And because all the payments, and the reason is all the payments that we enable are only for virtual products. So your Zoom, Jira, Figma, Slack, HubSpot, Salesforce, all of the online products. That's part one. Part two is we recommend the way you described that, hey, issue the virtual card to any employee and then put rules behind the scenes. So we internally maintain a catalog of around 38,000 products that are in the overall whitelist. And we know that Zoom, Jira, Figma, and Slack and HubSpot and Lucia and Copy.ai, all of these tools, modern to old SaaS tools, are software products only. So if somebody tries to buy, let's say, a 100 flowers product, it will know, the catalog would know that this is not a software product and it'll block the transaction. So we do that blacklisting, whitelisting by default. On top of that, you could have this card given to somebody in sales, somebody in marketing, and you could put rules saying Jill in sales can only buy sales products for $10,000 a year. James in marketing can only buy marketing products, such as a HubSpot, such as a Google ad, such as a LinkedIn advertising, what have you. And these rules help you control the spend before it actually happens. In compared to other products where the spend control is, yep, you have already spent it, submit a receipt, and your boss is going to say, why did you spend that much money? Versus you go up front and say, no, you're not allowed to spend. If you're in engineering, should you even be buying marketing products? Probably not. So it kind of white lists or ring fences what you can purchase. So that answers hopefully your second question on how we do.
Yeah, so very interesting. So maybe describe the workflow a little bit, because right now I think my listeners are going to have a lot of questions in their head. Okay, how the workflow is happening. So you mentioned that, you know what, this is a virtual card. So that's great. I mean, that's easy to follow, right? That you are using virtual card, let's say if you're buying from Amazon, and I don't even know if that is possible or not, right? So let's say if I swipe this on Amazon and I am looking for HubSpot, I don't know whether HubSpot is really available on Amazon, or you are going to go to a real HubSpot site and then you are probably going to enter the information. So obviously you are going to be entering your payment details on probably the checkout page. So on the checkout page, are you sort of hijacking the workflow? And then I don't know what is the correlation there in terms of how you are validating the transaction. Is it based on the SKU? Is it based on domain name? Do you want to describe the workflow a little bit?
Sure. So we are on the buyer side. So we don't do any integration with any payment provider or the
Okay.
payment gateway on the merchant side. So we are totally decoupled. So imagine, let's take Jill. She takes the card, swipes it on HubSpot.com. Doesn't matter it is HubSpot.com or HubSpot AI, the domain is immaterial. And she tries to transact, let's say, 35 licenses of HubSpot for $60,000 a year. The transaction comes to us
Okay.
in real time via Visa. So ours is a Visa Visa card. So transaction comes to our engine. We look at the transaction data packet saying, oh, who's the merchant? HubSpot. Merchant HubSpot is a SaaS provider. First rule passed. Look at the second rule. Who is the card owner? Oh, Jill. Jill is in marketing. She's authorized to buy HubSpot, which is a marketing software. And this is our own internal rule engine. Second rule passed. Third, how much is she trying to buy for? Okay, $30,000 or $60,000. Okay, Jill is allowed to pay $60,000 for purchases. The third rule passed, authorize the transaction. This happens in less than 100 milliseconds. From HubSpot to Visa to us, we authorize the transaction. If all rules are passed, response goes back and a proverbial receipt or a success page on HubSpot goes, and Jill has the 35 licenses. Behind the scenes, we receive a transaction record, settlement happens, we integrate with HubSpot, so we will pull the invoice data that what was the exact thing what Jill bought, and it is reconciled automatically with the $30,000 which Jill paid. If Jill now activates 30 users, we will, on an ongoing basis, monitor how many users are using HubSpot on a daily basis. Are they using the product that was paid for? So then you as an IT person, you as a finance person or a procurement can look at whether Jill did a good job of spending that money for the organization. So that's like a longer workflow, but I think I answered and hopefully it
Yeah.
gives you the picture.
Yeah, it does. I mean, great. I'm pretty sure the listeners are going to be slightly clearer in their heads as well in following the workflow. So now I guess one of the questions that they are going to have, and I'm trying to forecast, I'm trying to pretend the listener here. So let's say, obviously, I, as the manager, let's say, assign this card to Jill. Jill is amazing. There's no question about that. And I gave all the instructions. Hey, Jill, whenever you are going to buy the software, you are supposed to be. But somehow, when she decided to buy the card, she forgot that she's supposed to use the card. And she is going to use, let's say, some other credit card, or she is going to buy on her own. And then you are probably going to get invoice. So how do you accommodate that? Then are you going to enter the invoice in your software? How is that going to be reconciled in the backend system? Obviously you are slightly more front facing system, you still have to reconcile in the downstream. So do you want to cover that?
Yes, absolutely. So we also integrate with other accounting and financial systems such as NetSuite, Xero, QuickBooks, and others. And this transaction, let's say, didn't happen on our card, happened on an Amex, and then went into a downstream system such as, let's say, NetSuite. When we will sync with NetSuite, we will discover, oh, we have a HubSpot $30,000, looks like a software purchase. If an invoice has already been attached in NetSuite, we will bring it and we will deconstruct it. What was the license? How many users? And we do a bunch of AI ML behind the scenes. And it will, on the dashboard, it will show, oh, Jill bought HubSpot because NetSuite will only have the record of the transaction. It will not have the details of what license, what users, what contract. So we get the invoice and the transaction record and use it to deconstruct what Jill bought, how many licenses were bought, and do the same thing of is the product being used or not, right? Is these 30 users using the product or not? So in this case, it bypasses us, but goes directly to NetSuite as an example. We'll bring it back. And when you're looking at all your software expenses on our dashboard, you'll still see that Jill spent $30,000 using, let's say, the corporate Amex card, and now column shows it. But of course, the other attributes of what licenses, what users, what contracts, how many being used, that'll still show there. So think of this as it doesn't matter whether you use our card or not. Of course, if we use our card, we can stop the pain right there. If you're trying to spend, if you're not authorized, we can stop in real time. But let's say if you use Amex, we will surface those insights post facto through a different system, in this case, a different card that was used.
Yeah, so I love these integrations, to be honest. Okay. And the reason for that is because they are as good as the data that you are going to have in the underlying system. And again, we'll have a little joke about the accounting as well as the CFO community, I guess. And typically, when you look at any of the accountants or the controllers, what they are really good at is they are good at reconciling the transactions, reconciling the statements. And typically, what reconciliation means is, you are trying to balance the equation. I think you were trying to mention in the beginning, left and right, as long as they are balanced. And there are like million ways of doing left and right. Okay. So let's say if I have my HubSpot transaction as an accountant, I have my HubSpot marketing expense. I have a pen as the marketing expense. I have a notebook as the marketing expense, and I'm simply going to bundle them up and going to capture just one journal entry. So how are you going to find this information inside NetSuite that there was a little HubSpot transaction there? I mean, what is your rationale in finding this? Because the data could be all over the place. The way people might be capturing it could be all over the place.
Yeah, so we filter it out. So NetSuite will send us all the transactions possible, because NetSuite itself does not know whether it's a software, hardware, pen, or HubSpot. So when we sync, we see all the transactions and then we filter out that is not software. So if you remember, we have a catalog of all software products, 38,000 widely used and long tail of another 110,000. So let's say when we get a transaction record which says HubSpot, we'll try to match it, that is this something, a piece of software, or HubSpot is an offline community gathering, that you did, which you paid for in your neighborhood. Like, I'm just making things up.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the data that we see. If we cannot discern what HubSpot is, nor we could figure out what the merchant was, we will definitely, it's a bad data garbage. We don't know. It will never show up in our system. And of course, our recommendation when we integrate with these, that, hey, try to be as, you don't have to enter the transaction details, but if you have supporting documentation, that would help us, distinguish whether it is a software product or not. So let's say in this case, HubSpot was not entered. It was entered Acme Inc.
Yeah.
$30,000. But along with the Acme Inc., Jill attached the invoice that we saw. Now we will deconstruct based on the invoice. Oh yeah, we know this. Our models are telling us this is HubSpot because this is a piece of software. We will correct it as HubSpot, but of course we don't push the transaction back to NetSuite. In this case, it will remain as Acme Inc., but it'll show correctly in our system.
Okay, amazing. So now, obviously, in this particular transaction, you mentioned that, you are looking at the different data sets. And when you say I'm looking at everything inside NetSuite, and NetSuite probably going to have a lot of data, a lot of because obviously, depending upon how they are using NetSuite or any ERP system for that, it's going to have a lot of different transactions catering to procurement, to your finance, to your market sales. You are not going to get all of that data. You are probably going to get just the data that is going to the procurement. So is it going to be the AP bills that you are getting? Is it the POs? Are these PO lines? What exactly are you getting, let's say, from NetSuite overall in terms of?
Yeah, so we get all the AP bills in the feed, and then we look at what the AP bills are relevant to us, and then we peel off if we find any software purchase, and everything else we reject. We don't even store it. It is rejected, or not the right word. Basically, it is not brought into a system if it is not a software product, because we don't want to see what payments have been made to other vendors, other providers. It becomes a data issue and other compliance issues for us. So we only bring in the software products if we see in those AP bill feed saying, oh, this is a software vendor in that case.
Okay, very interesting. So tell us a little bit overall motivation, I guess, where this all started. What are the problems that you guys are trying to solve? I know that obviously centralizing the software expenses is one thing, right? But what were the major challenges that these companies were not able to solve, let's say, using the existing ERP systems or P2P systems? I mean, they can probably replicate the similar processes there as well. They can probably issue a controlled to mimic the similar experience that you guys are trying to provide. But what were the underlying problems that you noticed that you had to come up with a different?
Yeah, so the very foundational aspect of SaaS is it is recurring. Compared to every other purchase that you do, whether you buy flowers from 800 Flowers, or you buy a flight ticket or anything else, you pay for it and you don't worry about it. You're done. There is no dependency on your health. If you bought a wrong Starbucks which was infected with virus, the ERP system doesn't care about it, right? It doesn't, because it's only managing that expense line item. But if you bought a piece of SaaS, that leaks your customer data. If you bought a piece of SaaS, that is duplicate to other piece of SaaS that you already own. If you bought a piece of SaaS for 1,000 employees and 90% of the employees never used it, all of these three are not solvable by the current ERP process, because ERP is designed as buy stuff, pay to the vendor, move to the next line item, buy another one, pay to the vendor, move to the line item. There is nothing recurring in that. And that's the foundational item why we thought something to manage SaaS purchases, procurement has to be built. And this is bigger than what normally we thought it was, because SaaS has become the number two indirect spend today. Employees in mid-sized companies, and it is going to get infected in larger organizations. People are taking out their corporate cards and buying a $30, $20 chat GPT plus upgrade. They're not asking their boss, and your boss is not going to say, okay, that's fine, $20, let it go. But if hundreds of employees are buying the $20 upgrade, procurement should go and negotiate a better deal with OpenAI. Where is that intelligence going to come from? It is only going to come from if you have a centralized tool to look into what is happening in software purchase cycle on a daily basis. Hence, we thought it has to be built, and it is big enough. If you just to finish that thought, Sam, today SaaS is $190 billion annual purchase. It is growing at 18 to 20% year over year, much faster than your healthcare bill, much faster than your travel and entertainment and benefits. And it's going to be 500 billion in 2028. Where is the infrastructure to manage it? Where are the tools? We are running blind using traditional ERP and spreadsheets, and we thought there's a gap to be addressed there.
Okay, so very interesting. I definitely want you to touch a little bit more on SaaS being the second highest indirect spend. That's a lot. Okay, so number one, obviously, we need to understand different industries where you are seeing this trend, because overall, I think the whole premise of SaaS was that it is not supposed to be as expensive as IT. How did we get here? And by the way, I mean, see, when you look at different categories that are captured as part of your indirect spend, marketing should be the highest, because that's your bread and butter. That's how you are making money as the business. So how come you are spending more on SaaS? And I don't know which is the first spend, to be honest. So maybe touch on different categories and where you are seeing that SaaS is the highest spend. Is it because of the sales and marketing people? Because they are buying bunch of software?
It was very surprising to me that when we're looking at spend patterns, right? You have your benefits, you have your employee payroll, you have travel and entertainment, you have food and beverage, you have sales and marketing, and you thought SaaS would be at the tail end because how much software you really buy. But now you peel across departments. I'll tell you about us. We are 16 people engineering, product and engineering team, 27 people in total. Just in product and engineering, we have 20 plus software products. And I'll just give you a flavor, and listeners would love it. We have two products to detect anomalies in post production front end. I'm just talking front end. Two products. One of them is Sentry, which, let's say we deployed of new release, and then all of a sudden the React code has errors and JavaScript errors are coming to the end user. Instead of users reporting that JavaScript, Sentry as a product will detect these JavaScript errors and file a ticket automatically in Jira, raise an alarm in a Slack notification so that engineers can start working about it. Now look at the benefit. I don't have to monitor it proactively. Somebody else does it. Somebody else files a ticket. All I have to do as an engineer is get alerted and start working on it. Of course, I should have done a better job at capturing or catching these errors. We do that, but sometimes errors get missed out and go to the production. There are several layers of tools like this. We use two products for our back-end testing and our front-end testing. These are $35, $40 per user SaaS tools. We have a 3 people QA team, so they use it. Front end team of 4, they use it. So if you could start slicing the manual work individually, which we did as an engineer, now taken over by smart tools, hence the proliferation, hence the volume that has gone up. And I'm chuckling in my mind of your question that SaaS was supposed to make our lives easier. It was supposed to make things cheaper. But the expanse of problem solving that SaaS is doing is the products that are being deployed as SaaS very quickly. That's mind boggling. And I gave you an example of engineering, our department. Same thing happening in sales and marketing. Sales is using 5 or 6 different tools: HubSpot, Apollo, Copy.ai, SalesLoft. And today I was talking to my sales team. They saw an AI video generation tool. They recently raised some money. It's expensive. It's $235 per person. And I was chuckling, do I really need this? And this guy saying, it's going to save me 20, 25 minutes of my time generating a video that I want to send to my customers. This is the real world that is happening.
And this is definitely mind-boggling for me as well, to be honest. Okay, so I think the indirect spend comment that you had mentioned, I think that's related to SaaS. Okay, I don't think the it is going to be the second highest for, let's say, if you look at retail organization or manufacturing, distribution, traditional, industrial organization. I really don't
Not
think
yet.
yeah, so that's what I mean. See, let me finish, okay? And I will tell you one of the things that these guys don't understand: how expensive building software is, how expensive managing software is. So you guys are a software company, okay? And your highest spend is in buying somebody else's software. My average manufacturer, retailer, and distributor, when we are trying to pitch them an ERP or any sort of SaaS, their comment is going to be, okay, why am I buying this? Can I not build it myself? Okay, they don't understand that even for software companies, their highest spend is going to be in SaaS and the other tools that they are going to be needing to manage the software. That's how complex software is in general in building. But these guys don't get it. They don't understand how difficult running a software business is, how difficult managing software businesses, how expensive software is in general. People just don't get it. I don't know if you have any other follow-up commentary there.
So I think definitely. So SaaS is becoming complex. It's not like you and I getting together in a dorm and writing a bunch of code and releasing it.
Yeah.
It is becoming more involved.
Yeah.
User interface to backend to hosting to cloud. But to your comment, I think we will see this phenomena even in retail, even in other industries, manufacturing, and all of that. I'll give you one example. I was talking to a friend of mine who's doing a startup in construction technology. Absolutely last piece of the fort to adopt any piece of software, right? Or last fort. It is getting momentum that even large construction and mid-size. So there are 3 million construction companies in the United States.
Yeah.
They run on paper and pen.
Yeah.
Now, thanks to COVID, they have realized they could be digital, and hence they are accelerating adoption of software. So, and the day is not far, and you and I can riff on this forever, that a plumber, an electrician, a general contractor will start buying software the like you and I buy for building our own business.
Okay, very interesting insights there. So that's it for today. I don't know if you're going to have any last minute closing thoughts or advice for our listeners.
No, I think it's cliched that software is eating the world. Made by Silicon Valley investors and general meme in the valley. But I think we are seeing that much more happening. So figure out, if you're not software trained, figure out how to do it. Take a look at the industry, how fast it is catching up in every domain, and acquisition of software as a product.
Yeah, could not agree more. And there is just so much software out there in general, and the companies that are utilizing software for their advantage, obviously, they are going to be far more ahead. Just using and managing spend itself is an art that you need to learn. You need to find the opportunities on your balance sheet to be able to afford that. So the companies that are already there, they are obviously going to be ahead. On that note, I really want to thank you. This has been a powerful episode.
Thank you, Sam, for having me.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you'd like to learn more about Indus, head over to column.com. It's QUOLUM.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.